I'm Alina and I attended last year the course of engraving at the Academy of Fine Arts. I decided to speak about the conversation of Adolfo lesson had taken place at the National Gallery while there was an exhibition called Monochrome Painting in Black and White. In his speech, he talked about more than one of his artworks, but I'd like to start talking about the first one, the Weather Project at the Turbine Hall at the Tate Museum. What he explains is that his main interest was that to give back space to people from the perspective of cultural institutions. And what he focuses on is hospitality, and a particular way that one provided from cultural institutions like museum to the audience. And he thinks that this has a lot to do with the artist telling people he trusts them and that he trusts their presence. Since he wanted to represent only the space, the first idea that came to his mind was to represent weather phenomena like rain, snow, wind, because he thought that talking about the weather could offer people the opportunity to share something they usually disagree on. So weather becomes a social framework in which people can discuss and disagree without being unfriendly. In this room, or the Weather Project, light is provided by monofrequency lamps and at such a narrow frequency that all colors other than yellow and black are invisible. These lamps create a circular form that could be seen or as the sun or as the moon. From a picture, it's possible to see that people visiting the exhibition were laying on the floor looking at the mirrors that there were on the ceiling of the Turbine Hall in the Weather Project. So it was like having a sort of third point of view on their experience. And the fact of laying on the floor in a museum, it's something that collides with the common idea of good manners, of good behavior in public space. But in fact, it was also an experiment to understand how cultural institutions could provide more intimacy to the audience experiencing artworks. Eliasson's always thinks about how people move through artworks, how they can interact, how they are engaged. And he has the idea that there should be a relationship in which not only the viewers see the paintings or the artworks in general, but also the artworks see him back in a situation in which the viewer can also rediscover himself. So, according to this, everyone can go to a museum not only as a consumer, but also as a producer. And the concept of hospitality is still strong, and it's kind of telling people they should go to museums even though they think they can't understand it, because they're wrong, because everyone can be a useful viewer, everyone is welcome, and maybe be a better viewer than the ones who think they already know everything. What I most liked about Eliasson's speech is especially that, so the fact that everyone is at the same level in front of an artwork and that everyone can be a useful viewer. I think it's very important to share this concept because, as far as I'm concerned, art should connect people and not be an excuse to divide them. I have to admit that even knowing it's not a good thing since I am an Academy of Fine Arts student, going to museum, it's not my favorite thing to do. Maybe because I suffer lack of intimacy and of hospitality Eliasson spoke about in his speech. I feel that there's a situation that creates a sort of challenge in which you have to show you know more than others, and in which not knowing an artist or not recognizing a specific painting, it's something to be ashamed of. And I think it's very, very wrong that people can't be free to deeply appreciate an artwork just because they think they're not able to do it. So Olafur's speech really inspired me, and it makes me happy knowing that there are artists like him that promote this concept of art in which viewer and artworks are engaged, are linked, and in which everyone can approach to art the way he prefers. And I have also to share the idea that what is important after visiting a museum, after having visited a museum, is that it's not only having seen the artworks, but also having felt them, maybe walking through them, like in the case in which the artwork is the room itself, or touching them, or just even looking at them. And I have to say that all these ideas and this concept don't relate with my actual work. I do engraving, and I do it at a level in which it's very, very personal and not something to share with others. But nothing prevents me from thinking that maybe in future I will try to create something closer to the idea I spoke about. I'd like to create something that everyone can appreciate and something to be seen and to be lived, not in a detached way. I like to do something that can involve people's feelings, people's emotions, and bring them to my word, and maybe adding a little bit of color to their day. Since Olafur's conversation was taking place at the National Gallery, as I said, where there was an exhibition called Monochrome, painting in black and white, he talks about another one of his installations, that's Room for One Color. As in the Weather Project, in this room, light comes from monofrequency lamps that make people see only a saturated yellow light, and in which all colors appear to be shadows of yellow and black. Once you become comfortable with this vision, you can really start to pay attention to what is actually happening to your sight and to your vision. And the most obvious impact of this yellow light is the realization that the vision or the reality outside is really, really conditioned by how we perceived it. So the vision of reality is an objective, and this discovery allows us to look at ourselves and our world in a different light and in a different way. Since we are used to see a word in colors, if you were forced to see it monochrome at the beginning, and it's necessary to re-establish a balance in which our senses can continue to work the way they did before. But the lack of colors enables the viewer to not only see an artwork, but to start thinking about it, like how the artist realized the lightning or the shadows or things like that. If we are forced, and if we're looking at something that is not from the everyday, where a lot of things are taken for granted, for example, the side of colors, we need to think about what we are looking at, since it's not something we are used to. And I think it's very a nice thing to discover a new way to perceive reality. And what really fascinates me is this fact. So the fact that people are forced in a situation in which they can't see something they couldn't do otherwise. So it's very interesting how by removing only one of the certain aspect of life as the side of colors, everything changes and we become able to notice a lot of different aspects of reality that were hidden before. And I think this is a very beautiful thing and a very beautiful theme to work on, and I'd really like to develop it more.